All right, we are live. How about that, Tim? We finally did
Hey
it.
Jay, how's it going? Great to see you on the
Yeah,
on live LinkedIn.
great to see you too. Hopefully, we're on all the channels I set up. We did have a little flub there, but I'm just gonna check on YouTube here, and we are there. And I'm going to assume we're fine now. I
We're good on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome, excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is awesome. Great to be here. We've been talking about this for a while now, and here we are. So let's talk about automating your firm. What we're going to talk about today is automating your firm today. And if you know me, I love workflow process and automation. And Tam's experience is with being a Xero partner consultant and all these other things. And we're going to jump into that and meld our knowledge and skills and help you all with that as we move forward. And Tam, you want to talk about what we're doing here?
Yeah, so we are calling this new podcast series Xero Limits. I'm not gonna lie, we had some hard time trying to come up with a name for this thing, and I definitely leveraged ChatGPT to help us with that and asked specifically for puns around zero. So Xero Limits it is. We intend this to be a bi-weekly series designed to help accounting firms, accountants, and bookkeepers discover apps, tools, systems, and processes specifically around Xero and the Xero ecosystem. So we know that there's a lot of content out there for other general ledger platforms who I won't name right now. And so we're hoping to do the same here for Xero and Xero ecosystem.
So, quick introductions here. I already went into a little bit of Tam's background, but I met Tam probably about 5 years ago when she was working at Xero, and she was one of the partner consultants that was there. And partner consultants at Xero are those people that help the firms, figure out workflows and how the tools work and go a little deeper in the Xero product. And she was always a go-to for me. And from the moment I met her, I'm like, oh, we got to do something together. And, then she left Xero, went to Ramp, and we were working with her there. Really enjoyed that. And she then moved up and was a customer success manager at Ramp.
Yeah, I was one of the founding members actually of the accounting partnerships team. So it was a lot of fun the first year and a half or so to help build out that channel. And I did a little bit of everything: partnerships management, CSM work, solutions work, the whole gamut.
Yeah, that foundational team there was pretty cool between you and Chris and of course Brad. But yeah, so Tam has now gone off on her own, and she has Tech with Tam Tech with Tam.
Yep.
Correct. Okay, and she is working on a course to help you level up on your Xero skills. She is doing phenomenal work on her videos on Xero, and I can't wait for y'all to see some of that material that she's putting out. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. I think, at the core, so I come from at the intersection of accounting, technology, and education. And I'm really passionate about educating others, especially around software, because, as we all know, it's really difficult to learn how to use software effectively. And I just want to enable you all to do that as best I can on Xero. I appreciate, having options. And so with that, putting out resources to give you those options. And let me tell you a little bit about Jay. So thank you for that introduction, Jay. That's very kind of you to say all those nice things.
I'll check.
Jay has, in my mind, always been such a, and I don't want to use, a bad word here, but he's definitely a badass when it comes to accounting and e-commerce. And so when I first met Jay had his own e-commerce practice, and we went to him for just about anything and everything related to inventory and e-commerce. He knew all the apps, how everything connected with Xero, to a T. So since then, Jay has sold his practice to High Rock, where he now serves as a president. And I'm sure they're very, very lucky to have you. He is also an advisory firm leader. He did win 2016 Xero MVP. It still serves as a national Xero ambassador. So, for the other accounting firms out there who are looking to learn Xero, they, leverage Jay's expertise and experience just to use Xero more effectively. He's also a certified Zapier expert and a recovering appaholic. So Jay, I have something funny about that. When you told me that you were a recovering appaholic, I misheard you and thought you said that you were actually a recovering alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got excited. I got excited because I had just quit drinking this year. I
Right.
feel wonderful.
Yeah.
But that was kind of embarrassing because I'm like, yeah, I'm drinking kombucha. What are you drinking?
Yeah, no, I get that, and it's kind of like a pun, but I mean it fits me to a T. And
Yeah.
how you have a problem with apps. I was on a Facebook Live many years ago with a former Xero, and we were talking about something, and he mentioned an app, and while we're talking, I'm on my other screen Googling it and checking it out. Yeah, I had an app problem, and I'm working through all those issues. So,
More
yeah.
power to you, Jay.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for that wonderful introduction as well. So, as we do that, let's go over what we're going to talk about today. So,
Yep. So we are going to start out our very first session talking about no code and low code tools. We're going to be showing you some of the workflows that Jay has actually set up in his own firm, whether it's Zapier or through Make. And this is going to be intended for someone who, for those of you who maybe are thinking about dabbling in no code tools, or maybe you want some examples of how others might be using it. But think of this more as like an introductory, like what are they? How can they help you automate your firm? And then we're going to talk about some of the areas that we think are important to know around no code and low code tools.
all right, so let's jump on in.
So what exactly are low or no code tools? So I think of it as, I've kind of dabbled in Python before. It was very difficult, and there's a lot of people who are much better at that than I am, and so I kind of dropped it. But the intent, I think that, and Jay, you might be able to help me out with this explanation here, but you have APIs created, let's say on Xero's end, and then another app partner, and there's no direct integration that exists yet. So no one's, they don't have an engineer that's built an integration between the two yet. And so you can take something like Zapier, like Make, and create that integration yourself using very, very minimal code. Like it's very easy for someone who's never coded before in their life to connect those two softwares.
Exactly.
Jay, what would you say?
It's exactly that. It's giving the non-techie the ability to do technical stuff. You could, like you said, you have a app that doesn't connect with Xero natively. Well, we can use Zapier or Make.com to do that for us. And there are specific things that we can do with it. We're going to get into some of those in a little bit, but it can save you a lot of time. And for me, this was one of those things way back when in 2014 and 2015 that helped me build my former firm, the Digital CPA, and allow me to expand without having to hire that full-time admin person. And that's why we use them, and it allows us the flexibility. And these tools, for the most part, some of it's just drag and drop, and that's what we want. And it makes it really, really simple. It can be intimidating, and we're going to try to get you past all of that as we go through here. So
what's the learning curve? Jay, did you want to get into this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you could start with the simplest little automation, using Zapier, and we're going to cover this again later, but I suggest you start with Zapier because it is more simplistic, and just build something. We'll talk about how they work in a few moments, but I don't feel that there's a huge learning curve. It's not very steep. If you're going to go and dive in and do some, maybe 32 step zaps, and you're going to throw a little coding in there, it might get a little hairy, but for the most part, it's in your wheelhouse to get started. Not very difficult.
Now, Jay, do you use any of these automation tools for your own personal use case?
I do, and I'm going to show one of them off shortly.
Okay. Yeah, because I've used, I don't know if all of you have heard of If This Then That. It's called IFTTT.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you set conditions in the beginning. If they're true, then, a certain number of actions will trigger. And so I've used this personally, something as easy as, hey, track my location. If I leave my house, automatically turn off all of my lights, or like turn off my Wi-Fi signal on my phone so it's not constantly pinging in the network and killing my battery. Now, my phone's being trapped constantly, so I don't know what the point is of that. But I think you can also start on a personal level to get comfortable with how things like that might work, and then expand into using Zapier for business.
Oh, most definitely. And I mean, even you could use Zapier for your personal things as well. Your hobbies, your side hustles as well. And I actually still use IFTTT for like my thermostats. If my daughter lowers the thermostat too low, I get a notification.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. So there are many tools out there, and these are the two introductory ones. Is there Zapier and Make that we're talking about today that are great for you to use in your business and your personal life. And I'm often asked, it's got to be expensive, right? Is it effective? Is it cost effective? And when you weigh the cost of hiring a person versus $100 a month, and you can actually start on a free plan with both Zapier and Make, and the introductory plan I think is like $10 a month for both of them. It's in that range. It's not very expensive, so you could do a lot with a little when it comes to these no-code plans, and highly recommend it.
Yeah, and that's the cost on the front end, right? You're paying a certain number of dollars per month to use these tools. Not very costly, but I think of it on the back end, right? Like, can you afford not to implement these kinds of tools from a retention perspective? From, are your team members and employees doing the kind of work that they want to be doing? So that if they have room to grow, they might stay with you longer. But if they're doing a lot of manual, repetitive work that doesn't engage them, or they don't find valuable for their own personal growth. So I think of that on the back end. So is it cost effective to implement? I'd say heck yeah, because you can't afford to lose your people.
It's cost ineffective not to implement a tool like this. When I go back and I made comment about 2014 and 2015, I was using Xero Practice Manager. I was using Ignition. I was using, I don't know what CRM I was using at the time, but I had them all connected. And once the Zapier connection was announced for Practice Ignition or Ignition Today, I was ecstatic because I was able to save so much admin time by automating all of it. I pretty much had the lead to client flow down to 3 touches. Everything else other than having a call was automated, and it was amazing. And I would love to show it to you today, but that is actually gone. I never archived a copy of that. I wish I did. But
yeah, I put together a slide. Actually, I think that onboarding is such a crucial part in the sales workflow. And then if you have a really smooth, customized onboarding that automatically runs, like, how amazing is that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, actually, my process was actually shown at I think it was one of the last leader cons. And somebody was talking about how to, do that. And they had a 1.5-minute video on it, and it was amazing. And, Xero and Ignition had me talking about that. I talked about it at a couple of Xero roadshows and talking about the efficiencies that we gained. And, it was almost like having half an FTE by just having these automations on that part of the business. It was amazing.
I believe it.
So, we're getting to what can we automate at this point, and let's just jump in. We have a couple slides here, so I'll let you take this here.
Oh yeah. So actually, I have an updated slide. Sorry, Jay.
Oh.
Are you able to access that by chance?
I might be able to grab it. Give me a moment.
Sorry about that. I updated that this morning with real examples. Gotta love this, right? For first session.
Yeah, well, that's what this is live. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I don't think that you can have a webinar without some kind of, mishap in there, but
Exactly.
it's totally fine.
Let's, where are they?
Do you need a link?
No, I have it right here. Let's just do this. Let's see if this will work. I'm just trying to be a little creative here. And you might see a little bit of the show behind the scenes here. Nope, that didn't actually work.
Okay, no worries. If we we could just talk about it too. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about it? I'll work on bringing the second one in. How's that work? Sound?
Yeah. So Zapier, we wanted to show a really, really simple, like here's a single step Zap that you can put together, and then you start kind of building these blocks on top of these steps. So a simple Zap is what Zapier calls it. It can be, hey, I'm working with a client. I'm an accounting firm owner. I'm working with this client. I don't want them in my books. I don't want them to create invoices in Xero, whatever platform you're using. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a spreadsheet. Let's say that's a Google sheet. And so I can tell Zapier, hey, if my client goes into Google and creates a new spreadsheet row, I want you to take that information, create a Zap, take that information, and then push it over to Xero as a brand new invoice. And so this would happen automatically behind the scenes. Zapier would see the moment that a new spreadsheet row has been added, and it's going to automatically create that invoice in Xero. So that's a very, very simple single step Zap that you could create. And awesome. I see that slide now, Jay.
Yeah, got that one. Give me a sec. I'll have the other one back in here as well.
Sure. And then from here, so that Zap works well. You can then build on top of that. So maybe, because you don't get notified from Xero when a new invoice gets created, so you can say, hey, at the same time, when you create that new invoice, send me a notification in Slack or send me a notification in Microsoft Teams. Hey, a new invoice has been created. Now you can go in, make an action item for it, review that invoice, send it off, whatever it is that you need to do with that.
Yeah, and the multi-step stuff, I mean, it's really helpful. I'm going to show a quick multi-step Zap on something I built around this show, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But that brings us to time to look at some real screens and do some demo here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on in here, and hopefully, yeah, it is showing the real thing. So, the question was, what can be automated? And so this is the actions in Zapier for Xero. I'll make that a little bit bigger so you can see that. And there are 18 actions in Xero that you can create. And these are them. And, create invoices, create bills, create payments, all those things that you're going to do within Xero. You can actually do an API request. Yeah, that's a beta request that's out here right now. So they're getting this a little more advanced than they ever have. And it's really cool because, that's what it's all about is if you want to go and learn a little bit of Python, you could actually make that API request and do that and pull that data in to Zapier and then use it with something else you're trying to do. So I am actually going to try doing that. I actually was trying to take a Python course myself and try to get through that, and that went nowhere because I just didn't have time to do that with everything else going on in my life at that point. So when we are using Zapier and Make for that, we have two things that we're working with. We have the triggers and the actions. So the trigger is this happens, and we want what happens there to prompt another action. So, and we look at Xero, we have approximately 12 triggers. So my favorite one in here is a new contact. When you add a new contact that is a vendor, to automatically send them an email with the W-9 form so you can get that back and make sure your 1099s are processed. That's one of my favorite zaps of all time that I do at Xero, and I also do it with that other software too if I need to. Now, we have about 30 action or triggers and actions here in Zapier. Let's go over and look at what Make has here. So this is the Make Xero page, and there are 96 different modules in Make for Xero. So there are probably the same 12 triggers, but when we look at the actions, there are 65 of them. And again, a lot of the same ones that we saw, but we can also archive contacts here. We can create batch payments. There's so much more we can do with Make than we can with Zapier. And that's one of the differences between Zapier and Make. Zapier, it used to be very limited. They'd have more apps on their platform, but they were limited. They're actually diving in now and expanding on all of these. And Zapier owns a lot of this information, a lot of the actions and the triggers and actions, a lot of those integrations. Zapier owns it and maintains them. On Make does a lot of them as well, but there are other vendors that sell them into Make and allow them to be used. So that's where some of this gets expanded here on this side. And I can't say enough about it. I mean, there's so much here. So you can actually pull journal entries if you wanted to and see them and do analysis on them if you wanted to. So there's so much you can do here. And
that's incredible. Yeah, I've definitely heard a lot of traction, a lot of excitement around Make, and I can see why.
So I will tell you, I originally got into Make because I was using Notion, and the Zapier connection was just horrible. And the only way you could actually do what you needed to do was to use make.com. And I invested in it. I learned it at that point. Now, mind you, you mentioned I am a Zapier expert, and I still use Zapier all the time. But when I'm trying to do more deeper and more advanced automations, I'm going to look at possibly using both together. And I'll show you a bit of that later too. So this is kind of what the Zap desktop looks like. These are some of my zaps. I have a demo folder here, and this is one I'm actually using with our show here. I'm going to jump into this in a moment, but these are some of the other ones I just wanted to show some of the things that are, and you can see these are running. So these are active zaps that I use all the time. So when we create a document in PandaDoc, well, actually, this is for tax season. So we have tax consents we need to get signed. So we drop them into a Google Sheet, and this will send them over to PandaDoc to get those signed. And this creates it, sends it, the whole thing, and it saves a boatload of time of having to go in, find the template, populate the template, and send it, where all we got to do is copy an email address into a Google Sheet, and it sends it out automatically. And it's triggered based on that. Mm-hmm. Then here is one where I have my Outlook email. If I flag it, it creates a Microsoft To-Do item for me in Microsoft To-Do. It's there. I don't use it as much anymore because I don't really use the Microsoft To-Do. We, as a firm, use Active Collab, and that is where most of my to-dos now land. I don't know why that's there twice. This is one of those things I use for one of my hobbies. I am a NASCAR fan, and I pull out data from JSki, which is a NASCAR fan page, and post it to my Facebook page.
That's very cool. I think as a accounting influencer or content creator, there's a million use cases for that.
Oh, when it comes to social media content, oh yeah, and I haven't even gotten there yet. I mean, I'm working on something, the last item on the page, and I'll talk about it when I get there. I'm not going to show any of these. I'm going to show one or two of these, but I'm not going to get into the details here. We will do an advanced podcast episode or a webinar on this and jump into the nitty gritty. But this is just to show you what we can do. So yeah, this one here, this completed 7216, this one here is basically off of this PandaDoc being sent out. When it's completed, we then post it into Teams so that our tax team knows, hey, this has been done. We can start working on this return. So, it touches a lot of different things that we're doing. And here is one of the other favorite ones I have. When you upload a YouTube video, it populates it into a Google Sheet. And basically what I have somewhere else is based on that Google Sheet, it has the title, it's got the description, it's got the keywords, it's got a URL to the thumbnail. It then pushes it all up and populates YouTube with all of that information. So like you said, for me, I don't have a lot of time to do the content that I want to do. So I have to, have as much automation around what I'm working on so that I can spend the time on the content. It's no different than running an accounting firm. I don't want to be doing data entry and I don't want to be doing the admin functions. I want to spend my time doing consultative, advisory with my clients. And I want to spend the time with the clients, not pushing numbers. And that's what it's about. And this last one, is something I'm currently working on. Another content creators and a lot of content creators push back on Notion because it's not a true database. And you might have heard this, Tam, that Airtable is the way to go. And Airtable is a great tool. It's got a lot of automations built into it. And it's kind of like an Excel spreadsheet on steroids. And people Notion's about making pages and keeping your recipes. But Notion actually is a pretty robust database behind the scenes. And if you build it right, you can do what you need to do. And I've actually challenged myself to build a content machine that this gentleman did in Airtable to do it in Notion. So I'm working on that, and that is a work in process.
So let me ask you something, Jay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really cool Zaps that you've already created here. For someone who's starting out and maybe and they think like, oh, that's actually really cool. How do I get my hands on that?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share some of your Zaps, maybe through the QR code that we can scan later, or what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. There's a way to transfer these and make templates out of them. So yeah, I'd be glad to share some of them for sure.
Cool.
And
great.
The other thing is, you can also contact us and say, hey, I'd like to know how to make it instead. We can go about that and do that on another episode. So, sometimes it's great to buy a template and use that, but sometimes it's even better to build it yourself to understand how it works so that you can do it yourself. And then when you get it, you'll know the understanding of what is involved, and then you could take it to the next level and actually make it to meet your exact needs. So either
100%.
way, we're good.
Yeah. I think it's so hard because every firm is unique. Every tech stack is going to be different. So to get a template from someone else, it would be difficult to just copy paste anyway.
Right. And with like Notion, I started out a year and a half ago. I bought a template because I didn't want to deal with it. And now I've actually taken that template and made a number of modifications to it that when they update it, I have to manually update everything because I've made so many changes to it that I can't reload a template anymore with it. So, it's having that understanding. And, I'm the type of person at the age of 14, I did a brake job on my own Jeep, took it apart, put it back together. And my dad was like, what, there's no parts left over? I'm like, no. And how'd you do it? I said, I did one side at a time and I figured it out. And when I first became a professional, I started dissecting websites and databases, and that's exactly how I learned, was taking, somebody else's work, breaking it down and using it. So, that's how I am. But there are other people that don't want to do that. They just want to have it and use it, and that's great too. I mean, for me, it's about sharing the love and spreading this and teaching. So, please,
exactly.
Let us know what you want and what we can do to help. So,
are you ready to move over to Make? I would love to see what that looks like.
Yeah. So this here is the Make dashboard, and actually, let me just jump back here. This actually is a live paid account because I have to maintain my paid account as a Xero expert. This Make account is one of a few accounts that I have, and this is a free account, and I have 2 active scenarios, and Make calls them scenarios, Zapier calls them zaps. So on the free plan, and we'll get into that later, but you can have up to 2 active scenarios in make.com. And this one right here it's a little more advanced. It's actually quite simple if you look at it, but this is actually taking a webhook from Zapier and doing something in HubSpot. And I then later dug a little deeper into Zapier, found out how to do it. But I have this here just to show you that we can use both in conjunction with each other. And just to show that real quick, this right here, this automation that I built takes information from our landing page for the show for you to get more information from us. And here I didn't have a way to do what I needed to do, so I just created a webhook. And that webhook here comes on over here and populates HubSpot for me. So, just because Zapier doesn't do it, we don't have to completely move over to Make. We could take what we've already built, and there's always a way to move it to the other platform, and webhooks are a great way to do that. And question's going to be, what's a webhook? So webhook is basically a way for a system to send data out. And Zapier sends the data out via the webhook. Make gives me a web address. It goes to that web address, and that data sits there waiting for it to come in. And we'll look at the next scenario and show you how the data structures look here. But webhooks are a great tool. It's a great way when some tools just don't have that whole API built out. And it's a great way to get the data that you need. So,
and just Shay, real quickly, wanted to call attention to the fact that you mentioned, hey, if you already have workflows built out in Zapier, I'm all for advocating not migrating your entire system to a brand new system. It's just a lot of unnecessary work. It's a lot of change management. Sure. And so I love it. I love that you have a Zapier account and then you're using a free Make account and it's working well for you.
Yeah. And the thing about it is you can make it over if you want to, but why not? I mean, this gives you the ability to do things in both platforms and actually figure out which one's better for future jobs that you want to automate. And that's why I love it, because I get to experiment. And you might experiment and say, oh, well, actually, I like this one a little bit better because of these functions. And I'm gonna let me just jump here real quick. So this is the trigger. Every automation has to start with a trigger. And actually, it doesn't necessarily, but it should.
So we're back in, real quick. We're back in Zapier.
Right.
Okay.
And I just want to show the difference between the two. And you'll notice it's very flat and it's very linear. And basically, I'm going to click. Of course, I'm not logged in. So, yeah, it is what it is. This is going to take just a second. Not a big deal. So I'm just going to click edit here and go into it. And actually, you'll notice here, this is actually versions. So I will do a step or two. I will save it and then come back in and re-edit it and add something new. And then you'll notice here are my different versions. So I keep adding different things to it so that as I know it's working properly, I have a great base to go back to. And that's a great advice when you're building these things. So
that's a really great tip.
So basically, this is coming off of a landing page, and Zapier has added interfaces, which you could build a landing page and other charts and things like that. I built out a quick landing page because I didn't want to jump into WordPress to do it real quick, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But basically, you put your name, your email address in there, and here we're adding the information to our CRM. So this is what it looks like. And when you go through it, we then come to our next step. And this will take you through how you do it. So this is, I've chose HubSpot. And this is my account. and I am creating a contact. I will click continue. This actually is my account. Next, and here is where is all the information that is out there that you could put in there. These are all of the different fields that are out there that you can populate. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but when I want to do that, let's just say this one right here. Here is all of the data from that first step, this step here. And now all I got to do is drag it. Not when I say it's drop and drag, it really is. Because all I got to do is really click on it, and there it is right there. And I could pull in my email or build a more, I could pull in multiple fields if I wanted to. But, you know, it just shows you how simple it is. You can just check it and click on there, move down to the next one. And like here's contact information. So once you've learned this, it's really simple to move forward. And
I like that you can decide to omit data too, because you have a lot of data coming in from that first step.
Yeah.
You don't have to bring all that data into the CRM.
Right. And you don't have to use it there. And maybe there's something in a later step that you do want to use it with. And so I'm just going to close this out here. And, you know, we come down here, which is our newsletter. So same thing here. We can continue, come on down, and here are a number of fields. And so when I come here, you'll notice I can use data from any of these fields, any of these different steps. So when you're dealing with a platform, you have your email address and you're creating a contact. Well, when you create that contact, you then get a ID number. And that's what you need to use on the next step if you need it. So it's always there. And so you're pulling this data in, and you have all that data when you're building your Zap step by step, because the next thing is you want to add something to it or change a stage of the deal or something. You have to have that information in order to do that. So that is sitting right there, and it's really, really simple there. So again, don't want to get too deep into it, and that is kind of how the Zaps work. Now, when we come over to Make, I want to show you this one right here. So again, this is part of my NASCAR love. I have a NASCAR YouTube, a Instagram, a Twitter account, and this one here is going to that same NASCAR site, and I'm reading from their RSS feed and basically pulling titles in. So if I come over here, I'm going to this website, and I'm going back one day and pulling in all the titles. That's going from right now back. So this allows me to do functions right within Make to do that. Whereas if I was doing that in Zapier, I might need to use a utility to do the time functions. And by doing so, that is an additional step that you could be charged for, because you do have limits, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But in this case, I'm pulling in 10 titles. And if I wanted to see what they were, I don't want to run this right now. And just so you know, this is what it looks like right here. And this ran last night. And I have this set to run automatically at 12:45 every day. But I'm just going to come on over here real quick and click run once. And you'll notice just how quickly it's running. And it just ran. So if I come back over here, I can refresh this page, and here are my new headlines for today. Talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. signs a contract extension with JT Doherty Racing, which is awesome. And here's some other things. Now, what goes into doing this, and this is what I love about this, you could do this by pulling this information through here, and I can click here and see all of this information. And a lot of this doesn't mean anything to you. But when you start working with it, you'll understand it. And it's a lot like, you notice how much more detailed this is than what we had from the other side on Zapier. It's much easier. I find it much easier to use because it's much cleaner. And you know, this comes out, here's your output. You have bundles of your data. So you know, you can see here, here's each of the different stories in its bundle of its own. Here's the title, which is what I'm pulling through. And then here I'm taking that information, and this is a text aggregator. And what I'm doing here is taking it and putting this information, each of these, This is only the title of each of those stories, of the 10 stories that pulled through. And now I'm putting it through Anthropic Claude, which is an IA engine, and basically telling it, here's my information, giving it my prompt, how I want it to export, and some information about it. And what comes out here is, here's my bundle, here's my response. And this information here ends up pushing this into Twitter, and that's what I get. And it's amazing. Now, you could do this on multiple platforms if you want. And if you were to do that on Zapier, you could do it. And you might want to put filters in there. You could create paths in Zapier. Well, you could do that here as well. And I kind of did this here so I could show this. And I'm just going to do this live here real quick. So this is my Twitter feed here. I'm going to actually come over here and break this. I'm going to unlink that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add another module. And let's go with Instagram. I'm going to push this to Instagram instead. Create a photo post. And I'm not going to create the connection, but I want to show you something about it. And so I'm going to put that here. So now instead of going to Twitter, it's going to Instagram, but I'm going to break this as well. So I can come over here and put in a router. And routers are great. You see it wants to put some new things here. I'm just going to come over here, drag this. It was much cleaner when I did this earlier. But you'll notice we now have a connection there. And I could put that right there. And I'm going to take this one here. That's all right. Well, that connected to that. So I'm just going to come in and remove this. So now I have to come in and connect it. And this comes to the security question, which is going to come up in a minute. So you have to create your connection. In a lot of cases, you have to put in your username and password. A lot of cases, it's not the best way to do it. And what this will do, you're actually going to get a client ID and a secret. You're going to actually just use the API to do that. And here, they actually give you the help on how to do just that. They tell you step by step exactly how to connect it and get your user ID connected. And it's very helpful. And it's one of the main differences between Zapier and Make, that they actually help you through every step of the way with this information. So that is a quick run through with both Zapier and Make. And if you have questions on that, please don't hesitate to ask us, and we can actually come back to that on another time. So
yeah, I really like Make's interface. It just seems sleeker, newer, easier to add new steps. Like I've actually struggled with Zapier and adding steps before. It just wasn't as intuitive. So do you feel similarly?
Yes, exactly. Make was purchased, or I should say Integromat was purchased by a company, and they basically became Make.com. And at that point, they put a large investment in it, and they've learned from all the lessons of the older players like Zapier and Mercado and a few other players like that. And they've made it sleeker, faster, easier, and it just looks so much nicer. And having this interface actually helps you sell automations to your clients because it looks pretty, and you could actually help drive that information. So
totally,
that's what it's all about.
So moving into, you touched on security risks here just a second ago, but as you can see, even visually through that interface, that you have data that's moving from a lot of different areas. So where does all that security, where does all that data live? And what kinds of things would you be concerned about when using a tool like Make or Zapier?
Yeah, my biggest concern with using a tool like Make is ensuring that I'm using multi-factor authentication. So I have it set up that if I go to a new device right now, I have to, use multi-factor on pretty much everything we use. And I'm also using with this my Microsoft login, which is tied to my Microsoft Authenticator. And I often get text messages of new logins from my Microsoft account. So I tend to use that single sign-on experience, and that helps a lot of that. The other thing is when you are setting up your zaps or your automations, when you're creating your accounts to do so, it's the same thing if you're putting an automation into Xero. I fully recommend to use not to use your own account when you're doing it, because there are others that might be using it. So have a like at Hierarch we have a standard account, and at Xero, at the Digital CPA we had bank feeds at thedigitalcpa.com that we used for bank feeds. That way it wasn't tied to a single person, because if that person goes away, that Xero account gets deactivated, you lose the automation. So do that and have those accounts, every account with two-factor authentication, because that is the best way to keep it all secure. And if you can use the API like Make is doing here, you're using the client ID and the secret, and you're going into Instagram. This is what I did with Twitter as well. You go on in there and you create this, so that information is there. You can't reopen it. Nobody can hack your account and open up that API ever again without regenerating it. So it makes it really difficult to have security problems with it. That's really it. I don't see much risk. And this isn't a security risk, but this is a fail and learn situation. A few years ago, I was working with Xero and my company and another company, and I had 3 or 4 different Google calendars that I was using, and I'm like, I can't keep track of it all. So I built some zaps back in the day to, I can't say merge, but we were basically moving appointments from calendar to calendar and copying them back and forth. And at one point I had an out of office on, and Xero made an update. Somebody at Xero made an update, and at that time when they were doing a repeating event, there was no end. It would go on for like 30 years if you ever looked at that. And it did that, and when it hit my calendar, it automated, and when it automated, it duplicated, and when it did that, there was an out of office, and then it started spewing emails back that I was unavailable to everybody that was on it. So it made a huge mess, and it helped me learn about building filters into things and how to make sure we're trapping it. And so you use those mistakes as lessons and build off it and learn the best way to approach these things. Or
I feel like I remember you talking about that. How many notifications and emails did you actually get from this?
I wasn't getting it.
Oh, okay.
It went to Xero staff.
Okay, maybe that's why I remember it. I'm like, wait a minute.
it went back to them. It's like, hey, what's going on there? We've got like 1,200 emails from you, and they're still coming in. I'm like, yeah, that's something.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's do that. All right, and error handling. So this is a great topic too. And there is error handling built into every make.com module. You can actually tell it if you want to skip it, save it, what you want to do with those errors. In the past with Zapier, all you could do is create a zap to tell you that something failed. And now, actually in the last week, they've actually released a beta of error handling in Zapier as well. So it's out there, and you could actually do that. What happened on some of those issues that I was having, they would start exceeding the API limits on those emails that were bouncing, or the copying of the appointments. So you would get a notification eventually, and you'd go in to look at the Zap history, and you could see it's hung up there, and you could have it restart or delete them or whatever you want to do. So it's out in there. It's I haven't really tried the error handling, the beta yet, so I'll let you know on that. But it's really super slick in make.com. And,
well, incredibly helpful, right? So that you don't have to log into
Yeah.
your Zapier account and be like, oh, shoot, there's an error. We now don't know when it broke, how much data we're missing, and then having to figure that out manually, right?
Exactly. And a lot of it will stay in there that you could actually tell it to rerun it. But at some point, you could lose it because you just have too much data. So
we don't want that,
just
obviously.
One of the things that happen there. Exactly. But again, make.com has it, and you could skip it. I mean, there are ways around it, and I loved using it, and that's a more advanced thing. So we'll get to that on another podcast. And this is my favorite question. As somebody talking advisory and accounting, and is all this automation going to take my job? And it's like, it's not going to take your job. It's going to transform your job. It's like I said earlier, I don't want to be spending time doing the mundane, the data entry, the administrative function. I want to spend my time talking to the clients. I use an automation tool to populate tax returns because I don't want to spend that time. I want to review that return and be able to advise my client. And that's what it's about. We want to use that automation to our advantage to allow us the time to do what we need to do to deliver the value to our clients. And don't look at it as if it's leading to job displacement, because ultimately it's not. And I mean, to a point it might be, but for a smaller firm where you're starting out and you need to have that person working with you that is doing this exact work, think about taking that resource away and having them do administrative function instead of doing client work and advising the client and making revenue. You're at that point where you can't have both, and this is the way to make sure you do it and do it right. So take that time, do the investment, and put it in there and deliver that.
Personal experience, right? So AI, machine learning, automations through tools like Zapier and Make, like you said, just completely transform your job. I remember after I graduated college and, I call myself a baby accountant, right? My very first role, I decided not to go into tax and audit. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I went directly into industry, accounts payable, and I spent probably 90% of my job was manually entering invoices into the system.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were using MRI, RealPage at that time. So if you're familiar with property accounting tools. But we implemented an AP solution that automatically read all that information off the invoices. And then my job drastically changed. I was able to learn new things, and I was promoted into a property accounting role in a very short amount of time after that. So I think very, very highly valuable for a lot of people, higher value work.
For sure. Yeah. Like I said, when I was doing this in 2014, 2015, I couldn't get away without doing that. And we actually got a question from Gene Austin, who asked what tool and what tax software. So Gene, we use a software called Tally4, which we export our general ledger data out of Xero. We map it, and it pushes it into CCH Access, Thomson Reuters, whatever text you're using. It's going to populate that. And there we go. And it will allow us to do that. And in the first year, we spend a little bit of time mapping it. But after that, it's like 4 minutes from the time you export to importing, and it saves so much time. And I would so much rather talk to the client than do the data entry on a tax return. And a quick aside, Tam and I were talking about topics for this, and one of the most anticipated topics that came out of Xero was report templates And I saw so many tax applications for report templates at the time. And Xero just hit that one out of the ballpark with the report templates. But that's a story for another day. So, is it going to create an issue implementing this in your current workflow? Is there a disruption? And really, you're as you're doing these tasks, you could be building this out. It might take a little bit more time to do it, but there's not a lot of disruption when you're doing it. And if you do it the way I showed you, by doing one step at a time and saving those iterations and having the different versions, it allows you to build upon itself to get that done. And it's not very disrupting at all. And it's actually, there is one step you want to do before you build out automations, and that's understand your processes. And you never want to automate something that is a non-efficient process or a broken process, because all you're going to do is speed it up to that inefficiency or that roadblock. So fix those processes, make sure they're working as properly as possible, and then automate it to make it an efficient automation for yourself. That's just a quick tip for y'all.
Love that you brought up that point, Jay. I think, having a really good understanding of what your workflow is, what your process is, because basically all you're doing is you're taking that process and you're inserting it into Zapier, into Make. And if the process is already broken, then you're not going to get a good implementation. You're not going to have a good experience in Zapier or Make. But to your point in creating versions, I would even argue that, hey, create version number 1. Implement that, see how it goes. If that works well, then build on top of it. You don't have to do it all at once.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to do it all at once. Do it at your speed, at your comfort level, and you don't have to turn it on immediately. You build it as you're doing it, and build it in stages. So here's a quick comparison.
Okay. Quick time check too, Jay. We've got a few minutes, so you probably want to close it up here too.
So just for simplicity, Zapier is it. But for cleanliness and usability, I think Make It is definitely the way to go. Price, like I said, they're right there about that $10 a month range. They're pretty much equal. Integrations, you can't beat Zapier on that. There are over 5,000 integrations. There are about 1,600 on Make, but as you can see, the ones on Make sometimes go a little bit deeper. So you want to judge that when you're looking at that. And both get excellent reviews, whether it's G2, Capterra, or the digital CPA or the recurring alcoholic. So there you go. Let's go ahead. And question I get all the time, where do you start? Think of anything you want to automate and go into Zapier. Or just Google Zapier and Xero, and you could see like you see the pages I had earlier, you could see what they have available. And it will also give you the ability to put in the other tool you want to integrate with Xero and give you some ideas and show you some pre-built templates that are out there. So I would jump in there, get a free account on Zapier, a free account on make.com, and go from there. If you do that, you will not be unhappy, I promise you. And that leads to Xero had its awards show for the UK awards last night or the night before, Tam. Is that correct? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they just announced it. Mm-hmm.
I didn't update the slides with the nice branded ones that you had here, but I'll just let you talk a little bit about some of those awards.
Yeah, so the reason we're bringing this up is because the US version, the US awards are coming up soon too. So they're open up right now for nominations, not only for firms and firm owners, but also for apps that you feel like are, disruptors in the space. And so we wanted to highlight a few of those here. As you can see, Dext won Small Business App Partner of the Year in the UK, A2X Practice App of the Year, and then a couple of UK and EU specific apps, Nook and Cresco, So we'll skip over those if you're here in the US. But again, if you have any ideas for apps that you love that you would like to nominate, head over to Xero. They are having the US awards available. I think you can nominate through the end of the month. So May 31st.
And I have the landing page link there going across the screen right now. We'll also send it out to you in a newsletter if you sign up for it. So I highly recommend you do. And here is a QR code of the link to the landing page that I created in Zapier. And if you go ahead and take a picture of that, go to the QR code, drop in your name and email address, we'll add you to the email list. And that way you will be in the know about our next podcast that's coming up in 2 weeks.
Yep. And just to tease that podcast as well, so we don't want to don't want it to be us talking the whole time. We're going to be bringing on a guest the next time. A small firm owner, Xero expert, has been utilizing Xero for a while. And we want to cover and highlight the things that do work well for them, as well as the things that don't. So I think it's important to cover that as well. So we'll be happy to have them on, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, hopefully. Sign up for the newsletter, and we will notify you.
Awesome. Well, came in 1 minute over. How's that?
Yeah, not bad.
Not bad.
Pretty good. Pretty good for a first time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was fun. That was a lot of fun.
I agree.
So I want to say thank you, Tam, and everybody watching now, and those of you that's going to be watching on replay later. So if you are on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe so you will know when we will be scheduling our next event there. If you're on LinkedIn, you will get notified again there as well. So thank you all, and have a great afternoon.
Well, thanks, everybody.